Okay, hey folks, we're just starting up another stream again, just because I feel like the chat was for some reason not going live for me. I couldn't see anything, so I wasn't able to read some of the comments. So I just started it over just to make sure we had that going. If it doesn't work, I'm probably just going to stream and talk. It'd be nice to be able to actually see some comments and stuff like that, so we can actually engage. But we'll see how it goes. I'm going to wait and see if people pop in. Okay. I see some comments right now. Yeah, for some reason the chat wasn't going for me. Kind of weird. Give me 1 second. Yeah, again, so oddly enough, I'm still not really seeing it on my iPad Pro, but as long as it's on the phone, if I can see it on there, then we should be good. And again, can somebody test it for me again real quickly? Just say hello on the chat. I think YouTube is doing something weird for me right now. Give me 1 moment. You guys can keep hanging out for a little bit. Because the chat is not updating at all. What was weird was when I started over the new chat, or I'm sorry, the new stream, it looked like the chat updated. It seems like it's an app problem. Okay, on the iPad Pro, I just refreshed everything, restarted it. Seems to be going on there, I think. But it does seem to be an app problem. Sorry, I don't want to move forward if this is not working, because there'd be no point. How weird. I wonder if there was an update on YouTube for mobile app. Well, I used to have a Twitch, and again, I'm seeing a comment now pop up on the iPad Pro, so there we go. Seems to be going. Okay. I'm seeing an iPad. I think we can go. I'm not sure if it's like actually up to sync or date in terms of when the comments are coming in, but I am seeing it refresh and new comments are coming in. So I guess we can go. It's recording on my Android. Thankfully, the chat on the iPad Pro seems to be working. On my phone, it's not, so I can't see your guys' comments. Where we kind of left off was I'm doing a thumbnail right now, and this is for a shot in one of the pages for the upcoming book. Thanks for the updated time, 11:21. So that's synced to my time right now. Okay, that's good. We're good. So just to kind of refresh a little bit as to everything I just kind of mentioned in the beginning of the other stream. We're currently working on a page for the upcoming Dynamic Bible 2. And this page in particular is going to be the finishing page on one of the sections I'm focusing on right now. So what I showed earlier is that we had some studies of fish like this. These are some rockfish. I was taking a look at images and references and stuff like that. Study of form and whatnot, going into some like rock structures, incorporating the fish inside the environment, showing things like hatching plane directions for structures of landscaping, rock forms, vegetation, using ribbons, designing out some of the plants, going into the ideas of plotting out some of the landscaping. And so the actual piece we're working on currently is then kind of integrating all this stuff together into a singular image. So this is the rest of the other pages from, I'll show it again because it was in the other beginning of the stream that I had done. So this kind of shows you a preview of all the stuff I've been working on. The first chapter is all bone structure. So I'll take it up to this point here. It's all bone skeletal. So he's showing plans of shape, form, draw through, articulation of the joints, skull breakdowns. It's all within wildlife. Proportions, angles of views, 3/4 shots, playing with render, posing, hatching render again, playing with line, various animals, even prehistoric, so using things like dinosaurs. Second chapter goes into military vehicles. So we do a lot of various sort of machine work, vehicles of military type, mostly tanks. So a lot of side view proportion, breakdown of shape, deconstruction of details, various vehicles from there, half track, a little bit of talk about perspective, flattened perspectives here, playing with manipulation of proportion. We did that in the last stream. After the last stream, I started talking a lot about going into this sort of stuff, which plays with flattened perspectives, isometric views, 1 point, 2 point, all pertaining to tanks. Playing with elevation changes within where the perspective would be. Is it low, below the horizon line? Being able to visualize, forms of cubes within various positions on the horizon. Establishing it within an actual location. Various vehicle examples again, breakdown of shape and form. A lot of the text, like I said, there's a lot of empty spaces around some of these areas, and so that's where I'm going to type out information about, obviously context of what's going on here. Visual effects, how the visual effects can be integrated into the scene, whether it's like rolling tanks, firing it off, and then we moved it into marine life. So the marine life is the third chapter. And in this third chapter up to this point so far, same sort of deal. Repetition going into like proportion, shapes, movement, form, posing, draw through, form integration, basic anatomy. What are some of the fin structures? How the muscles work? Breaking down specific animals. Surfacing render. Applications of various style, movement, pose again onto, this is a snakehead bowfish, playing with abstraction, dynamic action, stretching, pulling, and then now we're at this point of using this rockfish, and just the picture that I showed you. So now we are at this page, which kind of, like I said, is going to be using the rockfish here. So I did a small thumbnail just to give myself an idea as to what's going to be inside this shot. So thumbnail work is something I think is, massively important, that I think all people, whether you're a student, professional, not only should be, but would be doing based on the requirements of a class or industry, and of course, even just personal need. For myself, thumbnailing process is something I still do. If it's something within the industry, it's something I try to incorporate as a process to show the clients what they want to be able to have as options. They can then start to choose, pick, give me feedback, and I can then begin to iterate on top of the ones they select. So this will be like a small thumbnail And thumbnails basically as a concept would be a small iteration, a sketch of an idea as to where things can be placed, how it can be designed. And so from that iteration, we have a good idea as to like where things will go, but also if I want to change stuff, I can manipulate it and alter things and do a bigger version from there. So we're going to transfer this over to this side now onto the page. We're not going to create a border. We'll keep it open. And I'm going to just take some of the elements and recreate it here larger in scale. For this particular piece, we're not necessarily doing it kind of like how I draw within my sort of performative sort of things. It's like straight in, detail, brush pen, that sort of stuff. This is for the book. And so as the book needs to show my process and how I need to draw through things, I'm going to replicate the constructive elements from here into the bigger version as well. So we'll establish the fish right about here. What we're going to be doing first is just kind of like give myself an idea of where things will go. So I'm going to ghost movement. I'm going to draw initially the circle for the head. So you notice I'm just moving. And the head can go right there. This is the central line movement towards where the fish is going to go. Here's the front end of the mouth. I'm going to show the slight underplane. We'll put the eye in angle position this way. So there'll be an eyeball here, eyeball there. So as you're noticing, I'm just freehand drawing this stuff and constructing it because this is going to be, again, printed directly into the book. So even though it's going to be an actual printed piece in a book, I'm not going to be doing an underlay or trying to perfect every single line, control every single detail. I'm treating this as if it's my own sort of exercise as well too, to teach it in a classroom, but also in the book I wanted to convey that way, genuine approach towards sketching, and not necessarily creating this illusion as if I am, just kind of going in there freehand sketching this stuff out, when in fact maybe I would have been using things like tools and rulers and ellipse guides, but this is all freehand. We're not using any markers. We're primarily just using pen. I'm going to take the body shape, go back this way. We'll have the fin come out from up here. And there's going to be this kelp forest, seaweed, kelp, and all that sort of stuff, kind of coming through from this direction. We'll have another one based on what the thumbnail is showing me, going down this way. And there'll be some rock structures, these ones here, coming down this direction, based on silhouette shape at first. I'll get to some questions and comments in just a moment. We're just establishing the introduction of the day, just making sure we can get all this established first, and then we'll talk. There's going to be some vegetation on this side. Movement this way. I kind of want to arc it this direction to kind of create this sort of framing of the fish. Big silhouette. So what I'm doing is blocking and everything. I'm not going into the details just yet. There's some elements of information in place, but I'm not jumping straight into more render or hatching or minor details initially. I'm trying to establish everything within the image I need, and then we'll go to some of the specifics. Here's some fins, more to the background. As this goes up, I now have a choice whether I'm going to actually have it go off the page or do I want to keep it within. If I put a frame around this, I could definitely kind of compose it, frame it. But from there, I think what we're going to do is have it just kind of ghost off. When I say ghost, it's going to just kind of disappear into this white paper. And so we'll use things like gradations and whatnot. So again, all shapes are in place. We started with the shape and now we went to the form with the cross contour. We have things like plane directions here with the animal. This is the underplane, side plane, top plane. This is a gill structure here. This is the side pectoral fin. The top dorsal fin we'll put up here. And we'll start to segment this for showing the individual spines of the bone. We'll do it inside the fins as well, swimming fins. Now these live streams I'm doing right now for this one and the one before, it's a combination of one, being able to just stream and connect with you guys out there, but also secondary to kind of archive the production of this book. I like having content, especially recording content of stuff like this. So that way, if I go into promotion when the publishing of the book is done, I'll be able to use these sort of videos to show examples of how something like this was made. So there's a two-parter here. One being the fact that I can share with you guys, but also for my own personal needs, is the fact that I do want to archive this work being done currently. And the book is almost done. I only have about 7 pages left. So I want to just use the last couple of pages to just really, nice to record some content. Okay, we'll read some questions. And again, if you guys had asked questions earlier, if I missed them, I didn't see them, apologies. You can ask again, and I'll try to get to them. If their questions are relevant to what we're talking about, obviously I'll try to get to it best I can. If I feel like the question is not really relevant, I'll just be skipping it over. So don't feel bad. It's just I like to be able to moderate my own sort of questions as we go. Okay. So one of the questions as I kind of scrolled up a little bit was, would you say learning the Asaro head is beneficial? And the Asaro head, for those of you that do know it, will understand the question. For those that do not know, basically the Asaro head is a referencing guide, a resource of a sculpture that was developed, I can't remember when, what year, but it's basically a plane or a breakdown of the human head. And it shows all the facets of the planes from the front to the side three-quarter. And you're able to see it from multiple angles because it's a sculpture, and try to get good proportions of the human head from there. And so would it be beneficial to learn it? I mean, yes. And it'd be beneficial to learn to draw things at a basic primitive cube, to also drawing observationally of things that don't have primitive laydowns for you, that you have to kind of problem solve yourself. So for example, I kind of built this tank model recently. So I would just draw from this in observation. So a lot of the pages I was doing earlier, I built my own model, put it up on a little stand. I was drawing from observation using this model kit to help me give myself information as to what tanks can look like. So then from there, I would look at it from different angles of views and draw basic forms and planes and shapes and interpret the plane structure of that particular object as well. So yes, the Asaro head can be beneficial. And let's see. Question from Manuel Draws is, how do your classes work? Are there random periods where lessons are available, or is it just I'm not sure what your last comment was, but in terms of the first part of the question, based on how my classes work for dynamic sketching, I offer them 4 times a year. So it's a quarterly system. Each session, each quarter is 8 weeks long. And each class is live, all recorded online, and they run for 3 to 4 hours, where we get to actually talk, interact, and much like this, what you're doing right now with me on YouTube, is how my online classes also operate. It's just that, you actually get to do homework. I will then give you feedback. For those that sign up for the full seat, which you pay for the full price, I will spend the time to give you independent one-on-one feedback of your work, draw on top of it, all that sort of stuff. There are options for those of you that cannot necessarily risk the financial sort of investment to education on this point just yet. You could also potentially look for a cheaper alternative. So I do offer a sit-in position where you get to spectate and watch the class. So you can still interact, you can ask questions, you can even do the homework. You can participate as much as you need. It's just that the only thing that you don't get is the full feedback of your work. So, and for the price point as it's at, which is much, much cheaper, you get access to a lot of content and also an experience with working with other people and me. So there's a lot of plus on that side. And again, there's a lower risk factor there because it's a much cheaper price point. But that's pretty much how the classes operate, and they are all recorded. So if you can't make it to the live session, all the sessions are recorded and posted on a class Discord, in which is shared then the same night or the following morning. And you can watch the recording as much as you want to for up to a year. And you can stay on the Discord as long as you want to. So that's how my classes generally operate and run. Right now, we are now going into the details of the fish. We've built the shape and the form. We've had a thumbnail. We've established all the placements of things, of elements, of assets within the scene. Now I'm going to the detail components. So we're going from big to small. We're not rendering, we are detailing. There's a difference between those two components. So in classes when I teach, I explain all this stuff. You'll notice me rotating the page here and there. Rotation of the page is perfectly normal. The current tool I'm using right now is the Micron Pigma. I'm just using this because it's the equivalent to what most people would be using. I'm also going to bring in some fountain pens once I push in some darks and line weights. Here I'm going to kind of graphically draw in some of the patterning of the fish stripes. Some of this stuff is inspired by things I've seen. Some of this stuff will also be just generated by my own imagination. And a lot of the demo, or I'm sorry, the sketches inside the book, a lot of them are using reference photographs because I want to make sure that they are accurate to the animal that we are drawing. And using the references is something that's very normal and something I do all the time. Going back to some of the questions. Will these skills make you a better industrial designer? Yes and no. Just because you have these skills doesn't guarantee you'll be a better industrial designer, but it won't, it certainly couldn't be a harmful thing. I would say most industrial product designers have the ability to visually communicate, to sketch their ideas out. So this will be a skill in which you will have to learn if you go that route, no matter what. But to what level of comparative ability, that varies from person to person. And you don't have to be the greatest sketch artist within any field. It's just having a level of confidence in what you can do and take advantage of your skills and strengths and go from there. So Potato Skibbity is asking, do you usually think that drawing from imagination is literally drawing from what you know from references? Yes. But it's not just drawing from what you know as a memory, but being able to also creatively manipulate it. So if I have a fish, how can you then creatively alter, manipulate, or abstract it in a way that you find to be creatively interesting? And that's based on then your own exploration of being able to play with it. And so then the imaginative drawing can very much be your own fingerprint, but using known structures and subjects that we all entangle with all the time. Drawing people, drawing animals, drawing plants, drawing vehicles, the everyday elements and subjects in our world. Interesting question. Any tips for applying the dynamic mindset to things like martial arts fights? I think establishing a very good foundation, being able to not necessarily specialize, but strengthen the sort of familiarity, the repetition, the mileage within those foundations to the levels and point in which it's no longer overthought, but much more of a natural sort of movement that becomes behavioral, habitual in some ways. But because that becomes predictable, being able to manipulate and adapt to a situation becomes really key. So in here, as we're sketching and drawing, building foundations of shapes and forms, I have to be able to adapt to the situation based on size, based on material, based on human error as well too, and being able to course correct to improve upon or succeed in my execution I'm trying to go for. So in a martial arts, whether you're talking about martial arts as more of a philosophy and as a kind of internal sort of building, that's a very much a one-on-one sort of entanglement. Whereas if you're talking about an actual combat sport, UFC or something like this, same thing. Adaptation to adjust to the opponent is a big part of it. So for some people, they would even say that the tool or the image, what you are creating, is the opponent. But I would say otherwise. I don't want to treat this like a fight. I don't want to create stress generating this stuff. So it's not the exact same mindset, but in terms of the training component, I would say there's a lot of parallels. Do I do realism or hyperrealism drawings in my free time? I'll draw from photographs and render them to be a bit more realistic, but I don't really do hyperrealism. It's not really my forte. It's also really not of my interest as much. If I went to a gallery and I saw a bunch of like hyperrealistic work, I'd probably give it a glance here or two, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time looking at it, mainly because it's not that I think it's bad. It's just not really that interesting. But there's going to be a market for it. There's some people out there in the audience out there that will very much gravitate towards that and respond positively to that field of art. if you want to call it that. But so for me, it's like no different than looking at a photograph. It's just enlarged with a different media. I understand the difficulty in terms of the manipulation of the tool and the time it takes to produce something of a image of hyperrealism. But again, in terms of creativity wise, I feel like it lacks, any sort of artistic influence or take, and interpretation, which I think all artists should be doing anyways. So this is an interpretive level of breakdown of form, and I'm not copying an image right now. I have inspirations, and I have, of course, references to the side of fish, but I'm not going to use them as a direct one-to-one. We're going into details. We started with the fish. We got some of the patterns. We got some of the elements of information. This is ready to go for render. I'm placing in some of the details to the plants. So this is going to be like a kelp forest, like I said. I want this to be more graphic and simplistic. I'll place in some elements of detail. And again, kelp. So we're talking about long strands of seaweed-like grass, weed, leaf structures, big stalks, tubes of kelp. So it's much more silhouetted 2D. See, and then the question is, will I print that sort of a, well, the way you call it is the Arutlan Natural Journal. It's actually, the name is La Route On. And La Route On is a fantasy journal I created a couple years ago and I'm still actually working on. It's almost pretty close to completion, actually. It's not that far off. More than 75% of the work is there. But it's this fantasy biological journal, collections of animals and landscapes of a location that a character goes to. I've always imagined, I've always wanted to print it. I really want to, even if I do it on my own. I may kickstart it if I don't find a publisher, but one thing at a time. And let's see, will the book be available on Liberdistry? I mean, that's the plan. It'll be available worldwide. Once the book is done, this one, it goes into print. I need to get this done literally by this weekend. So I need to finish all the pages to complete this weekend. I need to scan everything, and I need to then start going into and writing all the text out. Uh, the Super Ronnie crew will help me design the book, so that part I can leave to them. But a lot of the text information, I need to go and make sure all the notes are in place, and so they can just drop it in and get into print. And the print, I mean, it'll take a while. I'm hoping to get it done by this fall, in October to November, because that'll be when New York Comic Con and Lightbox Expo comes up. So having that book there at those shows will be very ideal. So if they are there, most likely that it'll be available through websites and like Liberdistry or Super Ronnie US and whatnot. So down here, we're gonna also incorporate like stone, rock-like structures. Here we're placing in plane breakdown from these basic shapes. I'm separating graphically of shadow to light. Maybe we'll see like root systems down over here. Sorry, I'm going to scroll down a little bit for the questions. Vergan's asking, you're learning 3D and 2D but suffer from fatigue after chemotherapy. Having less time now learning both at the same time, should I focus on one, risking to forget the other, or keep up with both? It's a obviously it's a very difficult situation for you. In your circumstance, Vergan, and the fact that you had to go through a treatment that's quite harsh and challenging, and hopefully your prognosis is good. And I hope you're coming through it stronger every day. And if you're not, if you're still in the middle of it, keep at it. Definitely encouraging you. Hopefully things work in your favor. Um, but in that situation, I honestly would keep up both. I wouldn't necessarily focus on one or the other, because the idea is that you're going to want to try to find a way to integrate both. If you treat them as separate entities, drawing in 3D, it's overwhelming because each of them requires so much technical information and trying to master them. But the idea is, how does one or the other support that side? How does your 2D support your 3D? Or how does your 3D support your 2D? So you integrate both. Does one need to be more prioritative though? I would say so, right? So there has to be a priority of sort of a hierarchy as to what you're working on. It could be 2D to 3D. It could be 3D to 2D. Could it be equally both? That I don't know if I would agree with. But you can say you're working more towards 2D, but you bring in three-dimensional elements. Let's say you are or drawing a fish, right, from this angle of view. And so you go into things like Blender, Maya, whatever 3D tool you're using, Nomad Sculpt, and you can build a very rudimentary sculpture of the fish. And so you can then pose it or move it in different angles of views, light it with a camera, light it with a light that is, inside the 3D space, and to be able to visually see what the examples look like from those angles. So as you have a 3D model referencing, you can also then keep pushing the 2D version as well too. And then also even hybridize both layers. So maybe you take your 3D model, put it in Photoshop, go on top of it, redraw it, paint it, and that could be the combination of the two pieces being brought together. So I would essentially bring in both at the same time. It's just you have to kind of consider what you prioritize one more than the other, if that makes sense. I hope that, it's helpful a little bit. How do I get through art block? Well, I mean, doing what I'm doing now really helps a lot in terms of just getting my creative enthusiasm kind of going. Like I've been working on these pages in this book for the past week and a half, like nonstop straight. And anything can become tedium and grinding. And even though this is still fun for me, there are times in which I kind of get distracted, or maybe I'm like putting something in the background, or I want to draw something else, or I want to take a break, but I don't have to finish this as well too. So I can then use also things like this with engagement, working with people, sketching with people, having peers or friends or whoever within the same vicinity, and it keeps me on track to keep creating. Now, it's not the same as an art block because, obviously an art block is not necessarily the simplicity of just distraction. It could be very much just a lack of interest of wanting to do something or not even knowing what you want to do. But I guess even there, if it is simply just an art block of not knowing what it is you want to create, having someone around you creating with you, sketching with you, you can generate and pass along ideas. What do you think about this concept or that story or this brand and property? Maybe you want to do fan art. That sort of stuff I think could be the ways to kind of help overcome that sort of situation. And that's probably what I would do. Well, it's essentially what I had done when I was younger. Mano is also asking, do you think a 15-year-old artist should already know in what field they want to work in? No, you do not and should not be thinking of a career at this moment. At the age of where you're at 15, what you should be doing is just simply playing with the tools, 2D, 3D, photography, sketching, drawing, sculpting, painting, all of it. Because what you're trying to do is expose yourself to as many various possible medias and that can, maybe catch your attention, hybridize again, as I said earlier, layer things together, and understand the fact that they all can relate and they all actually help and assist each other. So from there, you can then think about, well, what are some of the different industries that are out there? Not to select the work, but to find out what are the possibilities. So if I understand a tool and technique, where do they apply? How can they be applied? So as you take classes or go to a school, you find instructors, they can maybe show you examples of how it can be done. Then eventually by maybe your third year, fourth year in school, you're going to start to narrow it down as to what it is you want to do. And by the time you graduate, hopefully your portfolio will be then developed to be competitive to be able to work in the field you want to go for. Understandably, many people that come to school now for arts is not even really looking for professional sort of jobs. They might be just purely looking for their own skill sets to improve on to make their own thing. So that can also happen. But like I said, you don't want to necessarily be too decisive just yet because naturally, as you mature, your interests will naturally change also. So don't take it too seriously just yet, even though most likely people will tell you to be more serious about it. But you need to maintain this sense of fun factor. You got to just enjoy what you're doing. If you like drawing anime stuff, draw anime stuff. If you like drawing, hyper realistic things, draw that stuff. If you like animals, draw animals, right? But also at the same time, expose the various medias as much as possible. Audie is asking, looking back at my learning process, do I think it was more effective to master one subject before moving into the next, or to jump in between subject matters as I progressed? And for me personally, it was integrating as various subject matters as possible. In the beginning, yes, we did maybe focus on the figure, but even within that singular subject alone, you can break it apart to many subsets. From a human figure, you can focus on proportion, you can focus on render, you can focus on anatomy, you can focus on costuming, posing, expression, right? All those things could be segregated into individual sort of learning processes. But the thing is, it's not like I was doing it one after the other. A lot of times I was taking two or three classes at once. It had hands, an anatomy class, and a posing class, all at one time. So same thing, eventually as I went along, I would have diversified various things together as well too. So if I was starting over, I would very much draw, study, kind of break down and understand various subject matter all at the same time. Because you might think, well, wouldn't it be difficult to retain the information if I, spread my stuff out too thin? In my opinion, the idea is that what you're trying to unlock is to the understanding of the fact that learning whatever method to whatever subject matter, they can be translated or migrated to various other subjects as well too. Learning how to draw this fish here, I can take this information and construction and migrate it over to a different animal. I can migrate it to over to different, completely different things. Airplanes, right? Submarines, boats. And you might think, but a fish and a airplane have nothing in common. But I would argue that. I think in terms of a lot of the visual elements of shape and form and whatnot can be very much translatable. And yes, I also acknowledge the fact that they are actually two different things. So, of course, mentally in the beginning, it's really hard to overcome this because in your mind, they are two separate subject matters. You have no relation there. But that's what you're trying to learn. Let's see. Question is, what book sources would you recommend to learn composition? I think a good one would be everyone knows this one. It's the Framed Ink book. It's a pretty common book and a very popular one. It's been around for a minute, and I still think it's probably one of the best. There's really not that many sort of like curated art books that specify within entertainment design for composition. You're going to be looking at mostly like classical arts, traditional illustrations for compositional effects. But if anything, probably what I would study more of is cinematography. Photography and cinematography. Cinema study framing. How does the camera and the frame from the eye of a director, how do they capture the frame for a movie, right? Studying that, I think, would help a lot towards your illustration as well, too, because they do a lot on storytelling. How cooked are you in the industry if you don't learn digital? Well, it depends on what industry you're talking about, right? Because if we're talking about an industry that does heavily primarily resort to digital, let's say like the film industry, well, again, you're probably going to want to learn it because, as a conceptual artist in film, let's say you're doing like costume design or backgrounds or creature or prop design, most of them are going to conceptualize 3D first. They'll maybe sketch a little bit, but they'll 3D and then they'll paint it on top of that if they want to. Some of them will even forego that whole process of using 2D elements and just primarily build everything in 3D. Games is more of a mix and match. There's some industries or companies that might require more 3D skills, but there are some companies that might just kind of favor more 2D stuff as well. Animation is going to be much more 2D friendly. But again, it very much depends on the industry, depends on the company, depends on the project as well, depends on the people who you work with. But at the same time, having that skill, you're going to want to have because it is a standard now. But with digital skills, it's still incorporating a lot of the traditional learnings that we've passed down, and it's supposed to be a kind of an equivalent as a digital version to create efficiency and for post processing and being able to make decisions and changes and whatnot. Digital just makes it easier. So for myself, digital is being used primarily for client work. For a lot of my own personal work, is purely traditional. Dominic asking how many drawings in a lifetime what I've done. I have no idea. I couldn't even give you a number, to be honest with you. Okay, again, all the objects are kind of in place. What I want to do is dress up with some of the small stuff here. A couple of small little bits of plants, maybe coral, just to kind of dress up the scene a little bit. This is kind of the foreground area. I'm going to block into the front. And when I leave this as it is right now, what I'll probably do next, let's go into some of the hatching methods. And what I'll probably do is design wise is I'm going to keep the fish to be the focal point. I want this to be contrasting with a really dark elements of the kelp. So the plant work here, I'm actually going to push darker because I want it to be framing the fish around it. Even some of the background here, what I might even do is kind of place in a silhouette of plants here, silhouette, background. And that what I'll probably do is gradate, going upwards like this, dark to light, because I want this fish to be framed, it to be popping up to the front. So let's start with the fish first though. I'm going to just establish some of the darks. We'll do a generic even tone of hatching for the moment. This thing will have dark stripes. This is a rockfish. Lighting can be from the top, but also I imagine, let's say, like a flash or a light from the front end as well too. I can design the light the way I want to because this is not supposed to be, again, a realistic sort of photograph or image. It's supposed to be kind of an interpretation of being able to clearly view and see what this animal is. So lighting wise, I'll play with it semi-realistically, but also design wise in a way aesthetic that I want to. Again, these are all stripes. We just hatch a little bit to the body form as well. Moving around the edge, purposely not trying to get too dark. I'm going to keep this middle area kind of open. Typically in a thumbnail, you can also do a version that kind of controls the value here. Question I'm getting right now is how do you work on intuitive perspective? Sometimes you can feel the form better and produce much better work than usual, but it's not something you seem to have control over. I mean, obviously, the most common response that most people will give you is simply experience and time, right? The more you play with the concept of intuitive perspective and the more examples you get onto the page, the better understanding of what's possible. Right now, if you just try to keep it in your mind, in your head, and try to visualize only through there without sketching enough of it, you just don't have enough contextual data. So you have to just sketch further, sketch more essentially. How much more? And it could be hundreds, if not thousands of sketches, you know? So you got to produce a lot to be able to have enough visual information to understand what can be done. Like how much can I stretch or pull this way? How much of the rule of perspective can I break, optically or intuitively? But I think a lot of it also is in being able to observe what others are doing when it comes to that, being able to favor certain artists that you think do it really well, imitate from them at first, understand how they might be trying to do it, match up to the quality, and then try to apply it to your own iteration. That sort of copy method has been around forever and something I've done in the past in terms of looking at, other people's work when I was younger. And I think it's a very common way of learning for people that are just beginning. Copy at first, but copy has its limitations. Eventually, you got to be able to apply and sort of make your own decisions as to how you want to create your own. What do I enjoy about teaching? Well, at first, it was just out of curiosity. When I got my first teaching gig, I was asked by a school called the Concept Design Academy in Pasadena. That was in 2010. And so it was more just the fact of like, why not? I talked to my mentor Norm, who taught dynamic sketching and kind of originated this sort of process at Art Center. And so I asked him, would it be okay to teach this outside of that college? And of course, he gave me his blessings and told me to go for it. And so after his passing, I kept it up, and Art Center then invited me over. So a big part of it also was to upkeep the legacy of the process in terms of dynamic sketching and what my mentor left behind. But beyond that, at first it was so much more about just trying to uphold this memory of where it came from. And then eventually over the couple of years, I began to find where it really strengthened my skills of being able to verbalize, being able to understand people, and then eventually even more so understand myself. And so when it comes to teaching, it was about being able to open the doors of empathy, sympathy, technical information, collaboration as well too. Because when I was younger, I wouldn't say I was very much a people person. I mean, I worked in the industry and I worked with teams and whatnot, but that was purely it. It was just peer to peer. But I really didn't communicate that much, and I only spoke when I needed to. But being a teacher, you're kind of put on the spot to be able to communicate as much as you can, but also to be able to come to the levels in which you can understand people in general. So it really helped me understand more myself, and I think as I continue to teach, and it's been my 16th year straight, it continues to give back to me in that way. And as much as I, of course, try to give to people time, energy, information, experiences, I feel like it also gives me that same sort of experience back. So Dominic is asking, what about line weight? Where do you thicken lines? Where should you use thinner? I would say generally what I tend to do is if I have a light direction coming in, the opposite side of the light. Keep it that simple. Shadow side, darker line. Light side, lighter line. Do I still do master studies of artists I like or find? Not really anymore. Um, I mean, the only situation of a case I might do a master's study is, let's say, for an example, I will go to a museum and I would find some, master artist and I see their work original. I might have my sketchbook with me and I might do a quick study. Usually it's more isolated, specific, something about a line, a shape, a detail, something. But in terms of like a one-to-one transfer master copy, I haven't done those since I was in, college. But if I was a student, I would be doing them, very much constantly. Today, most of it can also be done in my mind. I can look at something as a person's work and be able to break it down internally in my head. Okay, I'm going to take these striped areas. I'm just going to punch them a little bit darker on the inside here. So I'm going to bring in my fountain pen. And we'll just stress these areas down a little bit more. I'm just layering ink right on top of each other. You'll notice that this is all dark and shadow size, but the striping and the tone of the shadow kind of even out. So what I will do is just layer more hatching right into the striped areas so I can get just a little bit of contrast and separation of that detail. Just knocking this part out first. We'll get to the next question soon. Here, we're going to push line weight around the fish on this side. And we're keeping it lighter down here. I gotta watch out for the ink I pick up. I don't want to smudge this page. Doug Johnson's asking, you picked up the marker style. How do you build in your details with marker without the boldness of the line eating too much detail when hatching, even when under rendering? Um, if you're talking about actual markers of varying values, in terms of building to the details, typically I would use only marker to render out, shade, tone, shadow shapes, and whatnot. And I'd be just using pen to indicate and mark the details on top of the marker. Um, so it's going to be a layering process. But, in terms of which order of process I go for, typically I would line the drawing and then I'll put the marker on top of that. Typically, that's how I would balance it. If that's kind of what you're asking. You might have to like reframe the question or be more specific. How important is gesture to my work in comparison to form? How many gestural studies have I done? Well, I mean, gesture is quite important in terms of the intent and also specific moments of what you're trying to do. Are there gestural lines in here? Yes, there are. The line work itself can be very loose and favorable to movement and action in terms of the literal line being put down. But the wording of gesture can be defined in two ways for me. One being gestural line that I'm physically expressing onto the page, and gestural pose of the subject matter that's around there. So based on how it's moving, the orientation, the action, the gestural pose can also be then overlapped and integrated with the line work as well too. But objects like this sometimes may not be that dynamically posed. It's just a stationary fish just sitting there. So it's not going to be as dynamically gestural posing, but it might incorporate gestural line, right? So really with the intent, I would be able to apply that kind of line work based on when the opportunity arises. Okay, what I'm going to do next is we're going to hit this kelp. And I'm going to stick with this fountain pen because I'm going to hit these dark. Have it hatch around, going in this direction. Again, these are going to be dark into the background. I want this kelp to be quite contrasty, so it frames and surrounds the fish. I will have it gradually gradate away. Hatching wise, I'm just basically choosing the shortest direction, going across from one end to the other. Instead of the long route, I'm going the short route. This allows me to grade it easier. And I'll overlap more hatching as we go. Building to the darkness, and we can jump to that dark if you want, but again, it can be done gradually, slowly as well. All these elements as well. Drop down. Because they're more shape oriented, I'm not trying to do any sort of like crazy form hatching. They're more just graphic shapes. So the hatching direction can be one directional. It can be the short way I'm going right now, but you can also alternate directions as well. We're going to keep moving our way up here. Work our way down to this piece of the kelp. This is all things like growth, vegetation, more seaweed on the rocks. So we're going to keep punching these. They're kind of all in shadow. I'm going to graphically separate everything. I'll get to some questions in just a moment. Again, apologies for not being able to answer every single one of them. I just have to be a bit choosy and pick which ones I need to reply to. So this goes from shadow to light, but in these light areas, it's not necessarily bright. So I'm going to use a bit of hatching to knock it down. But you'll see how that nice dark contrasting will push that fish a bit more forward. So I'm going to go back a little bit on the chat to see some questions I may have missed. And again, apologies if I'm skipping on some of these here. Kinji's asking, have you seen anyone of, I'm assuming you're asking if I've seen any of Araki's work, the artist author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And yes, I was actually quite aware of JoJo and the characters way back in the 90s, actually, because I had seen that stuff as mangas and whatnot when I was very young. I had no idea what the hell it was about because at that time when I saw it, it's not that I read the manga, I just saw images and illustrations that were in things like magazines and stuff like that. Um, printed versions, but I never actually was able to read manga or really watch any of the animations at the moment because a lot of it wasn't translated at the time. So I didn't even really know what it was about. But I thought it looked really cool. And then past the 90s and 2000s, I kind of just lost track of it. But I was always really familiar with the character designs and the artwork of it, which I really did like. But there were a lot of other mangas and storylines that I kind of tracked and followed from there, which, eventually led me to that pathway and didn't really go into deeper of JoJo. But today, still, same thing. It's like I'm fully aware of the property. I should really sit down and check it out more one day, though. The OVA that came out, the animation, I think it was like what in the 90s or something like this. It always looked really amazing. I actually never seen it. So the mangas I was reading most of the time in the 90s and early 2000s was Dragon Ball, because that was still being developed at the time. It was also Akira, and then it was also then Battle Angel Alita. Battle Angel Alita Gunham Galley, as she's known in Japan, was one of my favorites of all time. The Guyver was another one, but a lot of you probably don't really know or remember the Guyver, unless you've seen like the live action movie version at some point, or you've seen the most recent animation that came out years ago still too. But yeah, I saw the Guyver for the first time as an animation. This is like in 1994, something like that. I was over at some friend's house and he just had it on the TV. I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" And I was what, 15 years old, something like this. Dominic's asking, how did I learn to articulate really well? Good at teaching art concepts. Well, I appreciate your comments and thank you for that. Um, and teaching art to a student sometimes feels very vague because much of the decisions in art are sometimes emotional. Emotional is subjective as well too, and you don't have to necessarily agree with me. As I mentioned, certain things that I try to do, it doesn't always mean it works for everyone. But the idea in art education is to be able to try, right? Just to kind of see what does work and what doesn't work for you, to be able to attempt it. Just by taking someone else's word is not always the best route because just it's not the way you just see it. It's not the way you learn. It's not the way you observe it. But it's important to at least analyze it, attempt it, then make your own sort of executive decision as to whether you'll stick with it longer. But you do have to give it some time. And that's what's difficult about art is that it does take discipline and patience for it to kind of grip and hold and show evidence and result of action. And you can't be too hasty and be like, oh, okay, I studied for like 3 weeks and 3 months or something like that, and I didn't see any growth. And I'll quit that and do something else. It just doesn't really work in that approach because again it takes so much more time to really yield some outcome and result. It's much like a physical exercise and workout. You can work out for like a month, but you probably won't really see a large amount of result, until you really get in there and start pushing yourself. So it's tricky because then it seems to require a little bit of a commitment and there's a risk factor. It's like, well, what technique and what method or what artist or what person do I follow to achieve the things that I want to do? I think at the beginning, for that part of it, it's really just being able to latch on to certain artists and professionals that you really respond to the most based purely on what they do is also what I would like to be able to do professionally or skill based wise and whatnot. And then you try to find the resources of education that seem to relate and parallel to the things that they are also doing. You can ask around and ask like, hey, what would you learn for this technique? Or you can even directly ask them if you have some way to communicate with them. And that's the way you slowly build the understanding and where you invest the time and the money for that. But for me, in terms of the articulation part of it was purely class teaching. Again, teaching for so long now, over almost 2 decades, has enabled me to be able to find the words, but also given enough time to be able to analyze my interpretations of these things and to hopefully not just verbally communicate it, but to give you even comparisons and analogies and metaphors sometimes to be able to help at least contextualize and help people of varying levels of skills to understand what the concepts are. It's not to give you answers, right? It's to be able to give you an idea. And as long as you understand the idea of what we're trying to do, then the ball is in your court to be able to have the discipline and the patience to go for it and see how much of it you can develop as a skill that is equal to comparison of what you are analyzing as others out there. And that's going to be then on your sort of, I guess, efforts of drive and energy and enthusiasm. No one's going to give you the job. No one's going to give you the skills. All you have are just followed paths and roads that people have burnt, but eventually you will have to kind of go an offshoot of your own. Take those known skills and techniques that everybody else is learning and try to re-identify the relationship you have with it and make it your own. So start traditional, but then question the traditions. Would I say mentorships are worth it for a beginner? A mentorship program which includes teaching fundamentals, more advanced stuff over a year and a half? Yes and no. I would say quickly that I don't actually agree with mentorships at the very beginning. And the reason why, and this is what I usually respond to anytime people ask this question about mentorships, one, purely because as you are developing your understanding and skills within traditions of art, design, whatever the case is, you need more than just one pair of eyes to understand how something can potentially be done. And you might think, well, why wouldn't I use the person that's professional as an instructor who knows exactly what they're doing and go to the source of information? And the reason why, again, is because as you're beginning, you're still trying to even learn how to learn, not just to learn the technique and how to do certain things based on a skill of drawing or painting or sculpting, but how do I actually listen to it? How do I understand the terminology? What are they even really talking about? And so being able to be with others and working with those sort of peers of like-mindedness or even experience level of people that are also trying to find their way will give you the examples of, well, oh, okay, this is how that person did it. This is how that person did the homework. This is the different possibilities in terms of what can be done and also what it is that can be done as a career. So going with an instructor is great, but the problem is it's so one-sided. And the problem also is the distance of time. They have potentially 20 years of advanced experience than you. So for them, it might be, depending on the instructor, a little bit difficult to be able to relate to your current needs. And again, what they can maybe do is just give you the skill set and exercises and lessons. But in education and the foundations in the beginning, you kind of need more than that. You need people to be able to be around you to work with constantly. And you may not be around your mentor or teacher all the time, but if you can find friends, people that are also taking classes with you, link up online or in person and sketch together, do the homework together, get feedback from each other back and forth, and from there you begin to also problem solve. You figure that shit out on your own. You don't just turn to the mentor or instructor like, I can't get this, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, show me. The problem I think with education right now is that people are looking to be told what to do. Granted, I think that's also the case back when I was in school as well, but back then it's like we didn't have social media. We didn't have any other ways of connecting to an instructor other than the fact of seeing them in a class. So we had to kind of rely upon other students, other friends, and just kind of see what's possible. How can they do it? And then also then it's just now on my court, and I gotta just find a way to hit it back. Um, so it's that sort of sense of self-discovery that has to happen, and through that it builds confidence. But anyways, that's just my opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right. It just means that, based on my experience of having taught now for over 15, 16 years and having mentored quite a bit as well too. Mentor also in the meaning like I've gone through my own mentorship with instructors. It was never a case in which I asked for instructors' help as independent mentorships. It was purely a relationship as someone as a person, and I followed them because I thought they were more than just someone that can give me a lesson plan of how to draw better. They were someone I wanted to learn from life. And we just became friends. So a lot of mentors that I had in the past were not even art mentors. They're just mentors in life. They just kind of give you a nudge in a direction and encouragement to help you along your way. And that kind of stuff is great in the beginning. But like I said, it's not always art mentors you're looking for. But for me in recommendation, I think a lot of it was better suited as a technical means later on, right? But if you do find people that can be more on that side of encouragement, moral support, guidance of things in life, yeah, that's at any point in your life you can find something like that and should find it if you can. But when it comes to technical stuff, later. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer. Interesting question from Remington, which is, what would you say is the best place to start when trying to start making money off of your art? Well, first off, I mean, there's one way I can respond to this, and I won't say it's like the best answer, but I think there's legitimate response to it, which is don't make it about that just yet, you know, because if it's about trying to produce something to sell, your mind is focused on trying to develop a product that you think might be sellable, right? And so, is that really you producing something of a piece of work that is genuine, but is also, of a level of comparison to quality of things that are out there that might then be worth in that value of monetary means? Because if you're just purely thinking what can sell and you're just kind of like producing things that are sellable, making a product, eventually the longevity of that would run dry because again, now it's just another job. So then why are you doing it in the first place? Is it just to make money? I'm certainly not saying that's what you're trying to do. I'm just saying as a possibility. If that's the case, I don't know if I would start that way, because it's not to say that doing something like this can't support you financially, that it couldn't lead to, making a good living, and that there's nothing wrong with making a good living and monetizing your actual art and having people pay for it. But to me, that wasn't necessarily the priority at the beginning. But I could also say that's not necessarily true because, I went with the intent of going into the industry, but that's different. Because if we're talking about selling a piece of my art as an independent, I didn't go that route. I went to the corporate route. I went to go into the corporation of working for an industry where they're paying me a salary, right? Would that be the same? I mean, to a degree, but I would still think there are some differences, right? Um, but then going eventually into the independent route where I'm selling my work outside the corporate field. Um, Initially, I would say it had to start with something I'm developing that was purely enjoyable for me. I'll give you a case, an example, which is in 2008, I started my Comic Con sort of like career, you could say, right? And I started in San Diego Comic Con. And at the time, I was still working full time in the game industry, doing concept art, character work for a game studio down in San Diego. And so as I started Comic Con, I thought about, oh, what could I now make for my art to sell? Right now, of course, I was younger. I was probably in my what, mid, no, probably late 20s, around that time, 27, 28, younger than 27. But in any case, the thing that I actually eventually made was a sketchbook to sell at Comic Con. And you know what happened? It didn't sell because I was thinking more about how can I make money off of art. And you know what people really responded to when they came to my table? It was a series of drawings of characters that I'd done on paper. They were the originals. And I just put them out there to display. And everybody came up to me on my table for the entire week of that show at Comic Con. I was sitting by myself at Artist Alley, and they kept asking, "Can I buy that piece?" I said, "No, it's an original. It's for display. You can look at it." But I had these sketchbooks, and like I think 5 people, 10 people bought my book out of the entire show. Okay, I made like 70 books, and something like 10 books sold. So I didn't really make that much money, and I thought, oh, that's kind of whatever. Didn't really make that much. Granted, thankfully, I didn't really have a lot of overhead because Comic Con tables back then were free. Um, and I lived in San Diego, so I didn't have a hotel or something like that. So I didn't really lose money, but I didn't really make money either. So and then I learned from that. It's like, well, okay, well, I'll take what was responded to, and maybe I'll generate work of that type to maybe put out there, and we'll see what happens. So the following year, I applied to Artist Alley at Comic Con, and I got accepted that time. And I made a little mini sketchbook of those characters. And people came back and they saw that stuff. I said, "Oh, I remember that from last year." And they picked up that book and they bought it. It was a self-published little mini book. And right then and there, I kind of understood the idea that sometimes, first, of course, to make, if you are talking straight up about just making money off of your work, being able to understand what people want from you is important, right? But at the same time, genuine work, work that you also did without this intent of trying to sell it in the first place, people will respond because, again, it's not forced. It's not being overtly sort of conditioned to be something as a print or a book. I always find that the case in my work a lot, where I try to make a print of a piece with the intent of making a print, and it never sells. you know, and usually the stuff I just have a lot of fun on. It's just something I'm creating because I think it's interesting, and I put out there. And it's like, oh man, I want that. You know, and I'll listen to it. It's like, okay, you know what? Next time I'll print that piece, and then maybe it'll sell, or I'll try to create a piece in which it creates that kind of experience. That usually is what I tend to kind of turn to. So I prioritize my interest in creating and making something, and then the byproduct of making money off of it could potentially happen. But now at this point, I don't feel bad if I don't sell because again, it's not really my intent at this moment in time. This book again is like I enjoy making it. It's something for people. It's a part of my class. The class is my business, right? The school is what I can really kind of make a living off of. But the books that I make here, it's like, yeah, I can get paid for it, but it's not a priority as a goal of trying to make a lot of money off something like this. Um, I think it's just valuable content. I think it's just valuable information, but also something valuable for me as an experience to generate, which is why I do it in the first place. So I'm sitting here drawing with you guys and showing it to you as well too live. And again, I'm not trying to sell this book to you people. I'm saying, oh, I'm making this the best book out there, and you got to buy it. It's like you don't have to buy this. It doesn't matter to me. If you like it because you think it helps you, great. But if you don't, it's not a problem. I'm glad you stopped by. Look for something else, and hopefully I can help you in some other way. But has to hopefully come off in that approach, hopefully. But I also understand this. People can say, but that's you. You can say that. You've already been working in the industry for 20 plus years, or you're at this position at this moment. So you can think that way. I get it. So if you're starting off brand new and you're trying to establish a name or a look or an identity, a brand or content or something, I got to do whatever I can to sell that content, right? That piece of art. Again, I'm not going to argue against that. And so I would say, if back then in my 20s, I probably was trying to do what I could to sell things too. But keep that in mind. I was already working full time back in 2008. I had a full time job. So the Comic Con stuff was purely of just, is interesting. I'll just go check it out and see what I can do. I'll make a book and maybe I can sell it. Didn't sell. Right? So I had to learn from that. It's like, well, what do people want? I want to keep having fun. And so that was really the purpose of why I was doing those Comic Con shows in the first place. Eventually, it does yield into this whole idea of business and, producing stuff now that builds something, right? But in the beginning, I didn't think that I was going to be like teaching full time or running a school or any of that sort of stuff. I never had the plans to. It's kind of how it went. I don't know if I even answered your question at all. We're just talking right now. It's just a conversation point. So again, apologies for going a bit too drony in some parts. Yeah, I do have that Cusetto fountain pen. I'll actually use this today as well. Do I have any recommendations for painting with watercolor, books, master tutorials? Actually, speaking of Superani, Hyunjin, our manager, is primarily a watercolor artist. And so he has lessons and videos and tutorials online, I believe. I think they're also even recording one now because Superani is in town at the moment. We're doing a workshop this weekend in Irvine. And so Hyunjin is here. So he typically does a workshop based on watercolor. But beyond him, of course, I'm not trying to sell Superani right now, but I'm just saying these are the resources that are out there. There's not really that much more that I can actually recommend that I know of because when it comes to watercolor for me, I just learned by just playing with it, to be honest with you. I took like one class at Art Center on watercolor, um, and that was it. There really wasn't any other resource on there. There were a lot of oil painting, acrylics, even gouache a little bit during the time when I was in school. But for some reason, watercolor wasn't really that readily available as information. I don't know why, but a lot of it was me just kind of playing around, but copying work as well. Like I said, um, more just like colorizing drawings, not necessarily painting. you know, that's kind of what I normally do, really, because the line is what's coming up to the top and the watercolors underneath it, so it's an underpainting. But sorry, I don't really have any other resources for you. Sorry, I'm going to be scrolling down a little bit, so I apologize if I skip over some questions and comments. All art has an interesting question or comment. Do you think people respond more to those personalized projects, like independent ideas and genuine sort of work of your interest of your own things, compared to more of them, let's say, like fan art? In terms of that part of the first question, it's a hard sort of like position, I would say, as a response, because when I sort of responded to the whole spiel about making work and how to sell it, and genuine stuff tends to have a lot of interest and can pull people in there. I would certainly say that people listening to this could be like, no, I don't agree with that because I have the complete opposite experience. And they could say that original work doesn't seem to catch the eyes of people and fan art sells way more. And same thing, I wouldn't argue with this. I would agree with that. Based on my experience, usually original work tends to sell better. But again, as I'm talking right now, everything here is based on just personal opinion and experiences. So based on what I'm doing doesn't mean that that's what you should do because it's going to guarantee that sort of outcome. But what I'm saying is simply of what I've come across. I liked the fact that, sort of the original work that I'm creating yielded more interest a lot of times. But because over the years, I would walk Comic Con shows and anime expos and that sort of stuff and observe other artists, I will most of the time see the fact that, of course, fan art tends to be picked up a lot. So do I not sell and do fan art? I do fan art mainly when it comes to commissions. So when somebody wants an original piece and they want to request a character, I'll do it then. But I don't really do a lot of prints. I'll do it once in a while. Like probably the most recent was years ago would have been like the Ninja Turtles, and I may have made a print or something like that and make it limited. But again, it's very uh, rare and it's not necessarily my main thing. But I have nothing against it. It's just that it's not really my priority. So if people are using fan art to gain the attraction of the eyes of a customer, I think that's legitimate business practice. So use that as a driving force to achieve traction, and then use that as a way to kind of guide people to like, oh, by the way, I also have original work. Here's my sketchbook with other stuff, my ideas. So use the fan art to catch the eyes, bring them in, and sell your work, right? It's kind of the idea of how you can maybe go about doing it. What would you recommend to an artist with no environment where other artists, peers, and mentors are available? I mean, turn to discords. Right now, the guess the not trendy way, but this kind of even standard way these days is going online, and people turn to a lot of discords, communities. Some can be free, some can be paid for. I mean, one particular artist I would recommend even going to is Bjorn. Uh, Bjorn is an artist who's based out there right now in Europe. Amazing concept artist. He runs a online Discord where he just invites people in. He would give feedback and stuff like that. I think there's like a subscription you might pay. It might be free. I actually don't know the details, but like my Discord in school, it's part of the school Discord, so of course it's not open to the public. But there could be public Discords out there in which you can engage with other people that are also interested in the things you're doing, and you can sketch together. But at that point, it's also the simple fact of circumstance. Unfortunately, you're in that sort of rock and hard place. You're in a location or environment where stuff like that doesn't really exist. And it sucks. There's no other way to say it. I kind of wish it was different for you. I wish you had more people around you, more instructors, more schools, more resources. And if it was some magic, twist of a wand that can kind of generate that for you, I would do so, but I can't. And I know of people all around the world of different situations, and I've come across, and people just don't have the resources, and that's just the reality, and it sucks. That's just simply it. Again, it's not nice. So when you're out there alone trying to do your thing, it's really, really hard, and I'm sorry. But that shouldn't stop you from creating and stop you from looking for things online and stop you from trying to visit in places and create your own things and try to do the best you can. Love sketching and drawing just purely for yourself. And hopefully some break or some connection or something will help you to guide you in that path. All we can say is just kind of put yourself in a position to be able to come across those roads, right? So the idea is uh, your actions may increase the percentage of being able to cross potential paths with people that may be linked to those kinds of communities to you. But if you're just staying in your room and not doing anything online, not connecting to people, just drawing for yourself but not doing anything with it, and going out there, nobody will ever see your stuff. So should you use also social media? I mean, to a degree, yes. Um, I wouldn't use it as a point in validation or a point in which it confirms your levels of skills and whatnot. It's just a place to share. And that somebody might just be able to come across it and you find like-minded people that you can all follow each other, make comments and stuff like that. It's just a place to share your experiences. That's it. It doesn't necessarily mean, again, value of your worth of being an artist, or that you can or cannot be a thing. You simply just use it to connect. That's it. And so no matter what anybody says or doesn't say, doesn't matter. But if you do find those people that are worth it, you invest, right? But you have to put yourself out there sometimes. So I'm going to scroll back up a little bit here. Apologies. Um, will the Irvine event, the workshop this weekend, offer personal critique? Yes, we're going to try to. Because those workshops will be, actual live drawing where we're communicating and talking about our techniques, but also being able to work with students there. There's going to be an individual stock of kelp here. I'm going to cross the hatching this way. Actually, you know what? I'm going to bring in my Cusado. People have asked us about this one, and I want to do an actual recorded video about this particular pen. This is a Japanese-made fountain pen, and I found this at a pen show here in LA earlier this year. The video I'm going to make about this pen is basically just kind of talking about the function of it, the quality of it, how it draws, and basically what I want to title it is that this pen is not for you. The Cusado fountain pen is not for you, okay? And the reason why, one, I think the cost puts it out of the reach for most people. Second, I think it's too complicated, okay? Complicated in terms of the function based on this particular pen. Some of the other fountain pens might be a little bit simpler in use, but this has a plunger type. But again, it's very complicated. It's a bit tad heavy. But you know what? Even though it's not a pen for you, I would say it is one of the greatest pens I've ever used. So of course, it's like saying that of course, maybe it doesn't sound good. Maybe I won't use that title because then people are gonna be like, well, why can't I use it? Like what makes you special that you can use this pen and I can't, right? That's not the case. It's just that this is a really good pen. It's just that some of those minor elements and variables do make it out of reach for some people. The functionality, the price point, um, those are some of the variables. But man, this pen is crazy. It's an insane pen. Why? It just doesn't behave like any other kind of fountain pen I've ever come across. Because the style of this pen, again, the reason why it's so expensive is that this one you're seeing right now is a triple stack nib. So it's gold welded, triple stack. It's got an angle on it, okay? So I can draw upside down with this pen. So it can produce a very thin line. I'm looking for a scrap piece of paper right now. I threw away some of my scrap, unfortunately. So I'll use the back of this. Where I can go very thin with the upside down portion of the pen. I can flip it the other way around and get some really thick lines. Brush stroke like. I can go thin to thick to thin. It's kind of a ridiculous pen. And it's just the flow is solid. It's got a bit of a texture to it because of the kind of inks you can use. The angle can be challenging for some, I would say. But this pen, I think, if you're not seasoned in using fountain pens or haven't built a certain foundation in some of your skill sets, in line and whatnot, I think this pen can bite you. um, and when I say that, what I mean by it, it means it just won't behave the way you want. So this requires some taming. This thing is a beast. Looking at these really amazing, just like thick coverage of hatching lines. Get that punch of dark real quickly. It's a crazy pen. Cusado, Kyuseido. And again, it's an amazing pen, but a pen that I just can't recommend to people. I would never recommend a student to buy this particular pen. But I'm glad I did. So I'm just reading some of the questions again. Do I think work that people would want in their home sells more? I mean, yeah. This is why, of course, turning to things like known subjects, popular sort of trends, things that people follow. This is why fan art tends to do really well because people go to recognizable things. Um, so if they wanted a print or a book or a sticker or something like that, they're going to want to have something that they know, kind of favor on that side. And so then could you potentially even generate your own work that is able to incorporate that kind of mentality where I can design characters or images that kind of tap into that kind of known sort of like interest of things. Sure. What's a key one I would say? Wildlife. People love animals, right? So if you did like stylized iteration or cutesy things or creature design kind of stuff, that tends to do really well. But the issue then, of course, is if you're doing it, more than likely someone else is doing it. Right? So then, how do you design or illustrate or convey that visual slightly better than that other person in competition? And it's not always visual. It could be another variable that just makes your piece stand out just a little bit more. What that is, you have to problem solve that. Sorry, and I know I'm not really drawing at the moment when it comes to like or sketching actual things. We're just doing some hatching and render at the moment. So I apologize, but I'm working on pages for the Dynamic Bible too. So this needs to be done. So I'm just here hanging out, working on pieces. For those joining a little bit later, we did build this, construct it. So it's going to be on the recording. But right now, you're kind of at the stage where I'm just hatching away at this thing. And this just takes time and it's a bit monotonous. It's a little bit tedium and visually it's not that interesting. So you can hang out if you want to. You can leave if you need to. Do what you want. I'm just going to be here actually just drawing this out. And I would say I would call this more of a sketch to illustration because it does have elements of construction and whatnot, but it's not necessarily a study piece because I've already studied the fish and a bunch of other things in a prior page. Now I'm actually showing the application of it by generating an image of this animal within an environment in this kelp forest. Dave K is asking how am I feeling? Am I fully recovered? I'm doing pretty good. Thankfully, the prognosis recovery was relatively positive. It took a minute from last year. It's been officially a little bit over a year now since I was ill from last year. And so I think I got the best scenario out of the situation where it potentially could have also have been worse. My recovery time could have been longer. There could have been a lot more residual effect of the recovery, but thankfully I'm doing all right. I still get a lot of people asking when I see them in person how I'm doing. I appreciate everyone's concern, and I got a lot of support online, and thankfully I'm in a position where I can get that sort of stuff. And there's so many people out there that don't. And I going through something like this and imagining if I wasn't getting that sort of like support out there online, it's I can imagine how tough it might be. So I feel very fortunate. I'm very lucky. Um, yeah. So nothing else I can really say. Brazzle Dazzle is asking, do you find yourself wanting to tweak or change your perceived style, or do you think not think about your marked style that much? Right now, no, I'm definitely going through a process of trying to re-identify how I relate to my work, and I guess even what it is I want to do with my work. It doesn't mean I'm trying to drop this, the stuff that I'm kind of known for. I'm known for as the dynamic sketching guy. I've always been known as the sketching guy, even in school and college. That's what they always call me, the sketching guy. And so I've always had that as kind of like the label for me. I didn't mind it. I mean, that is literally is what I was doing. And that is literally what I am doing still today. I teach dynamic sketching primarily. That's what I'm producing as a book. So that's what I'm putting out there. So why wouldn't people also assume that, right? But that's okay. I have no qualms about how people interpret or assume what I'm doing. But personally, for me, I am going through very much a stage in the situation of trying to reconfigure what this means and how I want to go about doing it. A lot of it was presented to me by my manager from Superani based on conversations and the concepts of trying to find my next level, my next period of growth. Like, how do I move beyond what I'm doing now? And I don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. But as I said earlier, it's not the fact that I'm trying to also discard this. I'm always going to be able to do this. But it doesn't necessarily mean it challenges me, nor it helps me to grow past to find what that next level is. And I do think I'm able to potentially, have I have the skills and the mentality of being able to find what that might be. I don't know exactly what that is. It can be quite scary because now I'm presented with this question of, well, what is your next level? And I thought I knew, but then based on the conversations of the past, I was presented in the fact that no, actually, I don't know. you know, and so that was the thing. Also, is that I've been doing this for so long. I've been teaching for so long, and the fact that you start to you very much believe a lot of the things that you state and the things that you do, and why wouldn't I, right? Because they've always had positive reinforcement and positive response to people, so it constantly feeds into the fact of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. It's not necessarily an ego thing. I mean, it is. It's an ego for sure thing. But I didn't necessarily use it in a way where I would try to take advantage of certain situations or things. I would relatively say I was a modest individual. I wouldn't project it out there that I was like the best in the world, and nor am I. But I understood that what I had and what I could do. So there was a level of confidence there for sure. But I think some of it could also be interpreted by people online as like egotistical or prideful, and so I'm not gonna, I can't change the opinions of other people. You just have to think what you think. But personally, for me, it's like I am very much going through it and trying to figure out what that is. You can almost call it almost like an artist's midlife crisis, and it kind of makes sense. And I am 44 now. As I reach that age, trying to figure out like what's this second half potential. If I lived into my 80s, what's my next half of my life as an artist and what I want to do? And they're big questions and stuff that can be a little bit sort of they kind of throw you off slightly and shake your foundation. And in the beginning, it was a little bit uncertain and slightly scary, but that fear never goes away, and it's actually become a thing where I'm using it as a sense of vigor. It's like it's kind of exciting. It's like, well, what is it then? Where am I going to go with this? I'm trying to find out. So I'm on that path right now. What kind of paper do I usually work with? It varies, but in usually most of the times it's watercolor paper, cold press. This one right now is Bristol. I'm using Bristol paper for the book because it's a little bit smoother. It's easier for scanning. There's less sort of texture for cleanup. So I wouldn't really want to use watercolor paper for this one because it's just too much of a pain for post processing. So right now I would rather either use Bristol or marker paper in this situation. We've been going how long? About an hour and a half. So probably gonna go for about another 20 minutes at the most because it's already kind of late on my time. I do have to kind of get up to keep working actually. I usually go to bed around like 2, to be honest with you. So it's almost 1 o'clock right now, my time. So my normal bedtime is like 2 or 3 in the morning. Um, in terms of when I usually get up, classes begin at 10, so I'm usually up around 9. So, if I go to bed at like 3, averaging like 6, 7 hours of sleep. I'm pretty solid with that. Um, any recommendations for fountain pens for beginners. You never drawn with a fountain pen before, you don't know what to start with. Well, just because we're talking about a very expensive fountain pen, it doesn't necessarily mean it's always like the best tool for a lot of people, especially if you're just beginning. And even then from there, it also means that just because you are beginning doesn't mean that you're not allowed to use something that has a little bit more cost. Because even with cost that's a little bit more expensive, I think it's still a very legitimate tool to invest in. But I understand you want to start a little bit safer. So in terms of the kind of fountain pen I would even recommend at the early stages, you're talking about off the shelf, cheap pen, $12, $13 pen. Go to the Platinum desktop pen. Platinum is a Japanese brand, desktop fountain pen. Now that one usually only comes in with the cartridge. It has no converter in it, so you have to buy the cartridge separately. So if you run out of ink, you put a new cartridge in. But the nib draws beautifully. It's super cheap plastic handle. The metal on the nib is also crap, but it still produces a really amazing line. So I like that pen a lot. I would recommend it to a lot of my students if they want to kind of play with fountain pens. Something a little bit higher in tier than that might be like a $35 pen like Lamy, the Safari pen. They're built like tanks. It's a German brand, um, German engineering, but they're good pens. They're a little bit stiff because they're more for handwriting. A lot of the European pen nibs are a bit stiffer to me. The Japanese pens like the Sailor and the Pilot are really, really good. They're a bit softer, but a bit more pricier. I would say a good price point for a general fountain pen use, if you want to invest a little bit, is between about 170 to 200, I would say. And you can argue with me based on like, there's no way I would want to spend that much on a fountain pen, but I can give you exact reasons of why you would want to. Plasman is asking how many hours a day should you be studying? You've been doing 10. That's a lot. 10 hours a day of studying is a lot. But is that bad? I mean, not necessarily. Actually, this pen might need to refill. I might have used up all the ink already. It's not bad, okay? 10 hours a day, it's something that you'll be able to, oh, there it goes. You would grow a lot from. However, would I recommend 10 hours a day consistently for weeks upon months? No. Please don't do that to yourself. I understand there's a sense of like discipline and wanting to really push, and you're going to sit there and force yourself to draw nonstop, and I'm going to get better. And you will, naturally. Just by drawing 10 hours a day every single day for months to years, you will get better. But you will burn out so fast that whatever momentum and skill you have built, you will lose it as well too. It's like the what was that Greek mythology? I think it's Sisyphus, right? That's pushing that boulder up the mountain and hill. You can force it, you can push it as hard as you want, but that's gonna topple back on you eventually. And so it feels like you're always having to start over. So again, it's important to put the mileage in. It's important to be disciplined. You got to work hard, but I think balance is important. But it's also about being able to read your body and mind. And I'm not saying you got to also be too delicate as well too, because there are moments and times in which you do have to push. You don't really feel it. You're a little bit tired, and you got to just kind of push through it. You know, do the work, finish it. But you can't do it every single time. You have to give yourself a little bit of leeway once in a while. And breaks are just as important as the pushing points. So it's just like a physical exercise. You could work out every single day and tear those muscles up, but eventually it gets to a point where you will injure yourself. And the injury then doesn't allow you to build more muscle, and you're going to be out of commission for months, right? And so you're starting over at that point. So it's a lot of the same ways here. You don't want to burn out. You don't want to lose the momentum. So balance is key. Just read the situation. Some days, yeah, give it 10 hours. Other days, it might be even just 2 hours. Maybe you don't draw at all. Do something else. Watch a movie, go out with friends, hang out, visit a museum, take photographs, do some other kind of art sort of interest. Maybe it's sculpture, maybe it's something else. Play games. But again, there's a level in which you have those sort of interests that are also equally as creative, but they don't become necessary distractions that take you away purely. They are pure interests of things, but there's you don't abuse them, right? It's not like you're just playing video games for 12 hours a day. You can play, but there's a level, there's a balance to it. But it will be the same thing when it comes to like training. You don't want to do it 10, 12 hours a day every single day. It's just going to hurt you. at some point. And the thing is, when I was younger, did I balance that? And again, I'm going to be honest with you, is that no, I didn't. I was a situation of a case where I was working nonstop. And did I burn out? Mentally, not as much, but physically, I did. My body gave out. You know, the main area in terms of where I hurt myself the most was in my neck, because I'd be in a certain position sitting and drawing for so long. Um, my muscles in the neck strained so bad, they would spasm. They would pull. Some of the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Have to go to the hospital, get Demerol shots and muscle relaxants, and I would just push through it when I was in school and college because I forced myself to work. Yes, I got better, but I paid for it because still today I can be in pain in my neck and I get tension headaches once in a while, and it's not fun. And if I could change it to go back a little bit, I probably would have. I would have been like slow down a little bit, and go out there and do something else. Or and the thing is, I was in a rush to like finish school and finish the classes. And I don't know why. Um, I finished school faster than all my friends. I graduated a whole term sooner than most of the people I started with. There was no point to do so. So if I could change one thing to go back a little bit, it would have been to slow down. And that's one of the themes that I had today when it comes to just drawing. Also, it's just to slow down a little bit. Um, and just kind of enjoy the moment and enjoy the present, make more connections to people, and so forth. The common cliche, right? Smell the roses. But it is true. It's true. And thank you all for the comments about recovery stuff. Appreciate that. One of the things I very much love to draw, fish, I love to draw. But then it kind of seeps into various and many other subjects. I like drawing everything. It's the act of drawing that I love so much. The subject matter no longer then matters as much again. But the thing is, I'm not saying it matters. It doesn't matter at all. Of course, the subject has to pull interest visually. So I like animals. I like vehicles. I like weapons. But did it start that way when I was younger? No, it did not. I built this curiosity and I built this foundation in school, in college, over the many years. So that also means anybody here has that potential to build that same level of interest and curiosity and focus. I mention this to people all the time in classes. The only thing difference is between you and me right now out there is just time. That's it. I've just been doing this longer than you have. Now, of course, there could be people in here be like, well, I've been drawing for like 40 years, just like you have. Well, great. I hope you be on the same level. And if you feel like you're not, more than likely you probably are. You just don't necessarily see it that way. We tend to be our worst critics, right? Being able to find your own strength is tough. But as you mature, the idea is that you try to find more of who you are and what you want to do. It becomes less of an immature mindset, is that I want to be that person. I want to be that thing. Eventually to a point in which we say, I just want to do. You just do it. You just create because you love it. If you can find that kind of mentality when you're even younger, more power to you. I think younger people today are way more mature mindset wise than, you know, back in when I was in school and stuff like that. If I think back, because like as a teenager, and I see teenagers today, it's like I would look like a child, comparison wise, both physically and mentally. Young people today are very smart, maybe a little bit too experienced in things. One of the benefits I would say about my generation is that we did have that time and luxury to be able to just live as kids. I think maybe even this current generation is being forced a little bit to grow a bit too fast. And that's where that whole concept of play is so important to me. But if you're kind of driven out of that so quickly when you're younger, because of either education or work or career. The family tells you this. Not to say that it didn't happen back in the 80s and 90s, but I feel like the loudness of that is so much greater. I guess even the pressure of it even sounds to be heavier than it was to a level, I guess. So I'm at the bottom of the chat right now, so I'm just going to read some of the more recent ones. If I missed some of your questions or comments, apologies again. Thank you for the comments, T Gate. So, a question from Ferris is, and I'm doing well, thank you. Uh, did I ever do studies of the classical arts when I was a student? Oh yeah, absolutely. We certainly looked at the classical masters, the commonality of names of people like Rembrandt and Michelangelo and all those people. Caravaggio, I did multiple master copies of in oil. Um, One of the main people we looked at for painting a lot was Sargent, John Singer Sargent. I was a big fan of the illustrators of the period of the early 1900s. People like N.C. Wyeth, Howard Pyle, and a lot of the draftsmen at the time also then caught my attention as I got a little bit older. Heinrich Kley and Franklin Booth, Charles Denny Gibson. But during my youth and my 20s, or I'm sorry, my teens, of course, these artists I didn't really have any interest in. I was mostly interested in comics. But as I went into things like art history and learning about some of the illustrators out there in different parts of the industry, of course, it caught more of my attention. Um, and today, of course, I really favor more towards the side of those sort of classical illustrators and people. And there are amazing artists today, and there's still some that very much I would follow and look at their work. But in terms of just what I would prefer to look at more of is still some of the more classical people from that time period. Sorry, I'm coming off camera. All right, let's just move that a little bit. I'm just trying to visualize and see what I want to do with this. Again, I'm trying to really reinforce all this background to be super heavy. Line Decker is definitely one of them. I want that fish, again, to be just kept focused. I'm going to keep knocking some of this stuff down. How do I like to explore my own original characters? Do you have an entire episodic adventure for the blacksmith, or is it more snapshot vignettes of illustration? For that particular character, the blacksmith, it initially started off as vignettes of sort of moments in his adventure, like where he ended up, or what he's finding, or some character or creature or fight he's in. It was all sort of like those moments of a flash of a shot, and eventually it turned into the understanding of the style, understanding of the role of his purpose of the story, why he's on his adventure, and then leading into then going into the individual book to kind of write out what that particular chapter was about. But it started off very much as sort of vignettes. So a series and collections of images and illustrations and sketches and drawings that I would post online and whatnot and build that world through there. And from that sort of building, people would be interested in wanting to know more about the character. And so then I would start to generate the rules of the world and who the individual characters are, their functions and their role play, and also then the past to the future and the whole purpose of the story, right? But that's for that particular storyline. I think each individual project usually goes through its own process in making something as an idea. I wouldn't say there's like a right and a wrong way to do it, um, but I do feel like there could be ways in which it would help you as efficiency in terms of developing concepts. But I tend to, kind of gear myself more towards the visual stuff, right? I want to see it. I don't sit there and write notes, and I might do a bit of research here and there, looking at images and reading books and whatnot. But most of the times, I just have an idea and concept. I'll just sketch it, and then kind of go from there, essentially. Crab, is there only one day for the Irvine event? Well, tomorrow, Saturday, is the live drawing event, which I believe it was ticketed, and I think that did sell out because it's free. Because there's only so much space at the school. It's happening at a school in Irvine called Kazone, Kazon. If you're in Southern California, Kazone is like a basically what would you call it? A prep school. So a lot of younger people will go there to prep portfolios to apply to things like colleges and art center and whatnot. Um, so they work closely with the Superani team. Uh, our U.S. manager, runs the Kazone school. So the Superani team is here in town right now. Hyunjin will be there, Dong Ho Kim, and an artist that I actually haven't met yet, Rocky. And he's not Superani actually, but he does a lot of publishing. And they invited him to be a part of the whole sort of like exhibition and workshop. So I will be there tomorrow drawing live with them on Saturday. This is now hatch work to kind of show the impression of stuff even further away. So instead of drawing a shape and hatching inside, I'm now using hatching primarily to kind of develop the shapes of stuff further back. But Sunday will be the only day where the actual workshop will happen. And that's a paid event, but that's 3 workshops in one day. So it's morning till evening it goes. I think I'm going to be up in the evening. I'm the last one to do the workshop. I don't know who's first. And they start in the morning, but I'll be there all day. So if you show up, if you pay for that ticket, I mean, I'm going to be there, so I'll just hang out and talk to people. So if you got work or sketches and drawings, or you just want to ask questions and hang out and talk, I'd be more than happy to, if you show up. Today, I was already at the Gallery Nucleus finishing up the live piece, so I've been actually drawing all day today. Um, got up super early in the morning, dropped off my car to do some work on it. And then I headed over to the Gallery Nucleus to finish up that piece, which is about 2 hours of working on it. I spent another hour just talking to people in the review, feedback. And I came home and I started working on pages. And since then, I've been working. So today, I've been working long hours because I got to get these pages done. So the goal today was to at least get this page done first. And then tomorrow in the morning, I'm going to start up with another couple pages. And so the weekend, I need to finish up the entire book. But I only have 7 pages left. So for those that haven't showed up today, right now, later, I'll show you another preview of the book in just a moment. We're going to be wrapping up here in about another 5 more minutes. We're actually almost done. It's a great pen. Kenji's asking, you've been studying Genge Akutami for his art on Jujutsu Kaisen. You wondered, has there been any mangas that has gotten my attention purely for its art? I mean, there's so many. So many. If I can give you a quick list of people right now, at the moment, what I'm reading manga wise is one Vagabond. I bought a series of the graphic novels of the books to read them because I actually never had read them. Takehiko's work fairly well, looked at it many times in many art books, but I've never actually read the manga of Vagabond. So I'm reading that right now. I'm rereading a lot of Masamune Shirow's work. So I have a whole collection of graphic novels from back in the 90s I used to get as a kid. So, obviously the recent Ghost in the Shell animation that came out, I'm watching that. So I'm wanting to reread Ghost in the Shell again. Um, I love his Appleseed series. I'm a huge fan of Dominion Tank Police. My favorite is Orion out of all of his stuff. And I was a huge fan of his work in the 90s. So I used to imitate, because I used to have those Incheon Depot books, and I would copy his work all the time. Shiro. And then he kind of like disappeared in the 2000s, where all of his work, even back then in the 90s, he was doing like erotic work. But then he kind of purely became, an erotic illustrator, which I never really followed. Um, it seemed fine, looked cool, but what was happening was his work was becoming way more 3D and digital too. And I wasn't really a fan of his digital work. When I say digital, one, digital painting and 3D modeling. It just, I don't think it really worked well for him, based on my opinion of what I liked. His traditional stuff, was so amazing. One of his like early graphic novels, the Black Magic, M66 was super stunning as well too. But Appleseed to me is like one of like his best collection of work, but Orion always stood out to me. But from, Shiro to Vagabond, Takehiko right now at the moment, I think Takehiko's work is super cinematic. That's why I love his stuff. From Slam Dunk to Vagabond, the guy's work is very, very sort of, it's got a lot of emotion to it. It's got a lot of weight. which is probably why he's not finishing Vagabond. I know the fact that it hasn't continued and he hasn't worked on it for a while. He probably feels the same way I do with certain projects, but he's just like, it's so big, it's so heavy. Um, it just becomes a thing where you don't want to look at it anymore, you know? So I kind of get it. Sorry, I get ink all on my hand. I just don't want to get it on my counter. A second. This is a sign I've been drawing all day. See my middle finger? You get ink into it, but my middle finger right here is like all shiny because it's like it's been polished down with weight. So I've been drawing all day. I can feel it there now. Today I've been trying to push. Today was a push day. Work, work, work. And tomorrow I'll be probably doing the same thing. This weekend is basically just to like finish this. I haven't pulled an all-nighter in a long time, and I probably won't do so anymore. I probably could if I wanted to, but um, I will sleep late, 2, 3 in the morning, but I don't want to do all-nighters anymore. I used to when I was a student at Art Center. All-nighters were very common. The most I've stayed up for when I was a student at school was 3 days straight. Working, going to class, coming back, working, then going to class. And then on the third day, it crashed, and I slept for like 15 hours straight. Dangerous. Don't do it. Did I make any mistakes when drawing hard angles, like in front of a horse? The hips and hind legs make me confused. Yeah, I messed that up many times. I'll probably even mess it up still today, honestly. Um, that kind of stuff of mistake making and human error is common and happens all the time. So, well, how do you correct it? Use references. Look at it as many times as you can. Practice it, repeat it, and then you start to build a better confidence and memory to it. But even then, you'll begin to forget. You got to remind yourself. So I have to constantly like look at things again, look at more references and train and whatnot. It's very common, right? So I certainly don't escape that when it comes to mistake making. It's something that happens to me all the time. It's just that I'm able to recognize a mistake a little bit earlier, so I'm able to make some adjustments to counteract the accrued human error. But also, if I do make an error, I know how to also incorporate it into the image in which you don't perceive the mistake. So that's one of the other skills in which you can learn, which is how to use the mistake because you're going to make them no matter what. Doesn't matter how much training or how much experience or who you are, you're still going to make mistakes. Even Kim Jung-gi made mistakes. He said it all the time. It's just that you never saw it. I would say this all the time in live streams too. People who've been watching me for a while, you guys, a lot of these comments and questions are, very um, there's a lot of rinse and repeat, which is fine. I don't mind repeating some of these, answers and questions and stuff like that, because people that join in for the first time haven't really talked to me before, so it's nice to be able to interact. But for those that have been watching me for a little bit, you're probably really familiar with the way I speak and the way I respond to questions. So hopefully it's not too boring, especially after this many number of like sessions and years of maybe doing some of the YouTube stuff. And some people here who have been watching me, I hope it's just not too repetitive and not too stagnant. Give me feedback if it is. Haven't read The Climber. The manga art is fantastic. Reminds you of Vagabond. I have not, but I'll check it out. Climber. Do I think work-life balance is a myth for creative jobs? Absolutely not. Not a myth. Because I do it today. I work. I've been working hard today, but also I very much will always give time to the interests of things that I want to do. What is it? Next Monday, we'll go check out Odyssey, right? And then on Tuesday, I'm going to go to a concert to go check out Joe Hisai, the musician for a lot of the Ghibli movies, is in town at the Hollywood Bowl in LA. So I'm going to go check it out live. And then on Wednesday, I drive down for San Diego Comic Con. If I could draw one subject for the entire year, what would I choose? Hmm. If it was one subject, probably it would be the human character figure. As much as I love animals, creatures, weapons, and vehicles and military stuff, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I mean, the human character is something I enjoy a lot. When I first left Art Center and graduated, I wanted to become a character designer in animation. That's what I wanted to do. So I built a whole portfolio out of Art Center, wanted to be a character design and animation for Pixar. That's where I wanted to go. And you know what happened when I graduated? Nothing. I applied to Pixar. I knew people there, didn't get hired. Never even they never even bat an eye at me. So that dried up. I was like, okay, now what do I do? And so I started working on my portfolio more and bided my time and kept pushing a little bit. Went back to even school and classes to take more class just by sitting in on dynamic sketching. And then a job came to me by chance. It was for a game studio doing concept art for vehicle designs, tanks. I wasn't a vehicle designer. I could draw vehicles, but I wasn't a vehicle design person. But I took the job because there was nothing else I was getting. I need to work. I need to make money. So because I had to pay off loans and stuff like this, I was looking for a corporate job. So I went that field. I went to that direction, working in the game concept art field. And then that's pretty much the start of my career. Never got to work at Pixar. Never got to work in formal sort of like animation studio. I've worked on animations. I've freelanced for even feature, but never actually worked at a studio in game in animation. That's okay though. Have I ever done storyboards? I have in games for cinematics because in the industry, you potentially have to wear multiple hats. As a concept artist, you might be tasked to do a certain amount of designs of assets, but then maybe you have to kind of wait and for more things to come down the pipeline, so that you can't just sit there and wait for them. So they have you do other things. So I've done storyboarding for game studios. I've done even things like texture painting to apply the 3D models on UVs. I've done advertising work, covers for magazines and stuff like that. I've done obviously R&D and research. So as a conceptual artist, you would potentially tap upon many things. I've even when I was working at Sony in San Diego, was a mocap actor. So they came into the office saying, "Hey, we need people, to help with mocap," and they asked me to be a part of it because I was a certain size of proportion. They say, "Oh, you'll be a great, young person, young kid." It's like okay, and so they put me in a suit and I have all the mocap, spheres on me, and so I would act out, being a character. I think one of the games I was working on for mocap was it was old, not old, but it was a PlayStation 4 game. It was called 1880 something. It was like a werewolf game. Shooter. Anybody ever play that one? I was one of the werewolves. Mocap for that. So I had to crawl around the floor and stuff like this and beat background characters. I also was one of the young like hostage or something like that for Killzone, I think. Not the original one. It was like a sequel. Killzone game. Mocap for that one too. That was fun. Mocapping, acting, physical acting, right? So I've even done stuff like that in the industry. Is it true 10,000 hours of practice is mastery? Yes and no. What determines mastery related to dynamic sketching? In my opinion, there is no such thing. It's an illusion. Mastery does not exist. The sooner you can let that go, the better you're going to feel. There is no such thing as mastery. There's only the process and walking the path and enjoying every step as you go. Wherever you get to at that point, there is no top of the mountain. You constantly look through the horizon and observe every step as you move along. Pay attention to your surrounding environment. Respect and engage, but also love what you do. And eventually, down the line, as time passes, you will look down at your work and realize you come a long way. And I can understand that there's a chase for that in the beginning, that you want to master something, you want to be respected for something, validated for something. It's a young mentality. No matter what, naturally, as you mature, I think you'll come to the realization. I hope. I would hope. Do I do oil sometimes? Sometimes. I actually do like oil painting a lot. I used to do a lot of oil painting in school. I actually want to oil paint right now something for a wildlife shot photograph that I took many years ago. Been planning on it. I got to do it at some point. And I'm doing well, Kane. Thank you. Do I know any artists who focus on story first before even starting to make their own art versus how you focus on visuals? Uh, I mean, do I know of any artists that do that? Yeah, absolutely. My friend Izzy Madrano, he's a very good writer, and I would say he writes a lot. I don't know his exact process per se, but I would say he probably would be a case in which he does that, writes and then he draws. Other people call me master when you go far enough into the journey of something, but that's based on their perception. I could then obviously verbally explain to them my own perceptions and thoughts on that. You may not necessarily agree, and you can label that. I wouldn't accept that label because I don't necessarily believe in those certain things. But I can understand that there is someone of, let's say, a deeper understanding of an experience based on what they do as a sort of skill set. And but that's different, right? Because that's again purely just on time investment and love of what they do. It's that they're more familiar and they're more clear as to what it is they try to acquire or pursue, express, to understand in their pathways as they go on. But that wording of mastering labels that what it means is then of course is you reach this sort of like plateau or level that separates you from like the common, which I just don't think that's true. Um, I guess another, let's say it like this. I think that labeling of master almost labels it as a means of like it's unattainable for some, right? That only certain individuals can maybe get to that point of this idea of being a master, a true master in something. But again, I just don't believe in that really. Um, yes, I do believe there's separation of skill based on time, as I said earlier, and based on just how much you do and how much you love the thing that you go for and the path that I talked about and whatnot. And yes, there is a separation. But I also do feel like people can attain similar kinds of skill levels, but really it's no longer even about that down the line. It's about just pure understanding of your own sense of identity and how you relate to your skills and what you want to do for yourself. There's no more comparison anymore at that point. It's just you do it because it's who you are. That's it. And no matter what anybody says or compares you to, you could say that, oh, I wish I was that, or somebody might even say like, oh, you should be more like this person, or you're not as good as that individual. Again, it doesn't matter. I've found my love, and I've been able to reach a point in which it satisfies my interests. I'm happy, right? So then that labeling of master no longer is even within a scope of concept for me. Um, but, again, like I said, these are just opinions because people can very much say otherwise and believe it if they want to, right? Um, Bit of a personal question you had, but how does one cope with jealousy of others? You're talking about envy in a way, right? When somebody becomes envious of what you do, maybe, or possibly you become envious of them as to like what they've achieved, right? I'm assuming that's what you're kind of saying. Um, it's a difficult situation because as we are all humans, we can very much feel those things. And I think people can say that, oh, you shouldn't feel that, right? But how can you not? I mean, you're human again, right? Sometimes you can't help it, but feel sometimes envious, possibly jealous of things that you don't have. And it could be a skill, it could be a monetary thing, it could be a material based thing, right? Somebody has something that you want or have achieved something that you've not been able to. It could also be an envy aspect of not necessarily a skill or a material or a finance, but it could also be based on opportunity. Anything that I do seems to yield results and success. And anything that person does, no matter how hard they try, doesn't seem to, right? I've had experiences of dealing with individuals and people that I know closely and otherwise in this situation. And I am going to be very honest in the fact that things that I attempt to go for usually end up working out in my favor. And not to say that I haven't failed, and not to say that things haven't worked in my favor all the time, or have worked in my favor all the time. It hasn't. There are certain things I try for, like applying for a job, and I don't get it. I get turned down. Or I'm told, like, you're not as good. It's like you got to work on things more. I've been criticized constantly. But at the same time, at a certain point, when I would then, sort of like pursue things I'm trying to go for, normally it just kind of works out okay. you know, and I have that now sense of confidence in what I do currently at the moment. Also, will be okay. But it's also, again, like I said, mindset. Um, I think people get envious of that part where it just doesn't seem to bother me. That's what it appears like, right? Uh, so, for example, I did a solo gallery show this last month. This weekend is the last moment in which that gallery show will be up. It's a collection of all my work in the past number of years. So, a solo gallery show is a big deal for me because I haven't shown my work as a gallery piece in a number of years. And so, as I did the gallery show, and it's ending this weekend, I think out of 30 pieces, I sold five. Five pieces I've sold. Now I could look at that and be like, man, that's a failure, right? How come other shows and galleries, people are putting their work up and they're all selling? How come my work is not selling? I could think that way. And in the beginning, it kind of felt a little bit like embarrassing. Man, my work is, I guess, not that good. Nobody wants it. uh, but that's just the first sort of like knee jerk reaction. And then over time, as time passes and you're able to, process it and really just, understand what's going on, I then you have to focus on the parts that's actually, you know, more beneficial in the fact that, man, I got to do a solo show. It helps in my ability to reach more people, to be able to have people see my work because the response to the show was great. Everybody who came to it saying, man, your work is just whatever, such and such, right? Tons of support, lots of moral support, a lot of students, a lot of teachers, a lot of friends, a lot of professionals coming to the show over the many weeks. So it was successful. But if I only saw it from the sense of like, I didn't sell enough work, again, I can have that mentality of like, it's not good enough, or I'm envious of others that were doing better, even if I think that, hey, that work is equal to mine. But I'm not going to hold it that way. And I never will now at this point, right? Because I've been able to reframe it, but not only just reframe it, have that sense of being able to step back and look at the big picture. Look at the reality of what that experience gave me. So hopefully that, I don't know, touches upon your question about envy and jealousy. I don't know if it does. Um, Is there value in studying an image and getting a likeness one to one from reference? Will it come naturally if I draw from imagination? I mean, there's value, yeah. If you study a photograph and copy it one to one, there's value in that. We've done it in the past as a student. I think it's a legitimate way of practicing, but it shouldn't be the only way, right? And nor should it be about drawing from the imagination only either. Drawing from references and stuff is important. Use it all the time. The goal is not to excommunicate things like references and resources. It's about knowing how to utilize it better, but also not becoming dependent on it. It becomes support system. Hopefully that fish now stands out pretty well. Do I have photographic memory? No, I do not. Any thoughts on imposter syndrome? Oh yeah, I can have a lot of comments and thoughts on it. We won't really have the time to go into it too much, but what I will say is that it's a value valid thing, and I think most human and it's very normal to feel that way. I think what's important is to be able to share it and to find other people that you can also discuss things with it and not harbor it and hold on to it too long, because I think if anything else, your mind can make it more real, right? That's it. I love Joseph Clement Cole. Guy's work is amazing. Do I have any resources for recommending on character design? Resources and like books? Not that I can think of. There's a lot of videos, right? Uh, Gumroad videos, Patreons, artists that share their content. I mean, who's that one artist? She does some really great character work. TB Choi. Never met her. I don't really know her, but she seems to have some really great content. People always say like, "Oh, I love her character work," and I've never watched it, but it seems like it's valid because I get a lot of feedback about it from people. How do I keep my hatching so clean? Well, it's not really about hatching clarity. It's actually more about balancing your edges and your values, dark and lights. Uh, the hatching can still be a bit messy, and it's fine. But besides that, if it's a bit more about the line work, being able to find the right tool does help. Some people, artists will tell you the tool doesn't matter, but I argue otherwise. I think the tool can matter. And then from there, it's like being able to I don't want to say master the tool, but become very familiar to the tool set, having a good sense of pressure, speed. The pressure is everything too, right? And then practicing. So right now, like the pages over here, the book that I'm currently working on would initiate sort of practices on being able to understand, well, what direction hatching can we go, right? How can it be implemented to surfaces? What's the initial plan of what plane to follow? And then being able to apply it. I'm going to bring in that stack of paper. I'm going to put this one, I'm going to let it dry out a little bit more. This one will go into the back of the book. Any music that inspired my work? For the blacksmith, there was a band that inspired the world of the blacksmith, mainly because when I would drive from San Diego to LA, I would put on that song, that music that is the album, because it was the inspiration for a trailer in my head. A trailer meaning an actual movie trailer of my story, The Blacksmith, as I would play with that background music. And that artists, the artists, they were called, they're still called, they're still around. They're called Magic Sword. Some of you may have heard of them or not, but their music is all like synth, electronic sort of thing. But it's really their first album is awesome. Magic Sword. But besides that, I listen to a whole array of music. I love funk, blues, electronic, metal, you know, even like folk music. I love jazz. I love the banjo. I love country. I love, bluegrass. I like all kinds of music. Um, in the 90s, I was a little bit more specific. I mostly listened to things like electronic, like trance music. There's a band called, not a band, I call them more of a artist. Like Juno Reactor was one of them. Prodigy I listened to all the time. Came Up the M I listened to all the time. Um, I also grew up in the Northwest, so there was a lot of those artists at the time as well too. The '90s kind of grunge sort of music, because I grew up in Oregon, the Northwest, so that was prevalent. Um, but I'm more of a movie guy. I like music too, but I'm more of a movie person. And so what we'll do right now that it's kind of dried out a little bit, let's put to the back of the pile. This is the current book up to this point right now. This is the Dynamic Bible 2 that I am working on. Where's the first one? So this is actually the Korean copy. We were able to do interpretations of language. Apparently, we have the Korean copy. We're supposed to be doing a Russian version as well too. Apparently, either way, this is the Korean version. So this is the first Dynamic Bible, and this should even somebody asked me, it's like, should I get the first one, or should I just wait for your second one? Well, the first one you're still going to want to get if you're interested in this sort of material, because the first book houses all of the exercises of line, shape, muscle memory, all the things that you need as a basics within the foundations of understanding the forms and whatnot. So this first book still has a lot of value because it's supposed to be coming in as, volumes. So volume one. So in volume one, we covered things like insects, and we covered also the vehicles of cars, but we only had two subjects in this book, insects and cars. And this was what, an 80-page book? This second book is going to be a lot bigger. So the second book right now that I'm working on currently, this is just at the moment 3 chapters that I have. And the 3 chapters that we have in here is that there are no exercises, because all the exercises are left in book one. So we have skeletal structure here. So we're using skeletal structure of animals, wildlife. So it shows a lot of the building of articulation of joints. I showed this earlier in the stream already, but I'll finish it off this way. Skull structures, building planes, form details, gesture, posing, proportions, being able to render, understand light, shadow, shapes, posing, hatching directions, but also then applying it to like other various type of animals, things like, prehistoric animals like T-Rex here. Finishing off with another kind of modern day mammal. And then we go into military vehicles. So the second chapter is military vehicle of tanks, other kinds of military vehicles as well. A lot of side view, shape building, planning, understanding proportions. And then I actually played a lot with this in the last live stream, which is about, imagined tanks making up vehicles, playing with the concept of what the military vehicle is, and then going into things like these sort of views of isometrics, planning out sets, locations, then perspectives, 1 point to 2 point, um, trying to find positioning of where to put cubes. Again, setting things in location, using perspectives, the classical sort of methods, the various other vehicles within I can use, effects. All of this doesn't have text yet, so I need to put in text of information as to like what each of these pages, informationally are about. And so what we're working on currently was the fish section, aquatic life, marine life, purely of fish. And so we build to the shape, proportions again, form, movement, certain anatomy, certain individual kind of fish, surfacing texture, render, stylistic changes, then the independent movements. This one's the interesting part here, playing with things like squash and stretch, effect work, creating dynamic action, abstraction. Then the independent fish that we try to study. This is the rock fish that we're doing right now. So I did a series of these pages today, went into some of the environmental stuff, and then we finished off today with this piece. And I'm still not done. So I have about another 8 pages to do. I got to do probably about 4 or more tomorrow and finish the rest of it hopefully by Sunday, if I can, or Monday. And that'll be it. That'll be the entire, sort of artwork creation that's all original. So within this book collection, I'm also going to drop in a lot of additional demos from digital days when I was doing class demos as well too. Sort of versions from things like chalkboard plans that I did in the past. So the next Dynamic Bible will actually be much more substantial in terms of page count and content compared to the first one. I do want to make more volumes. So I'd like to be able to do at least 4 or 5 volumes. That's the plan. So then the volume 3 will have maybe a couple of additional more subjects, but I also want to get into things like various other materials, maybe watercolor or ink wash, or possibly incorporating things like creativity, making up things, right? So we'll see where it goes. For now, the second book, the plan is to try to get this done as soon as possible so we can get the book out if we can, hopefully this year. Will the second book be the same price? It'll be a little bit more because of the fact that it's going to be a much more thicker book. I mean, the original one here is what? In the US, $35, $40. So I think we don't have a price yet, obviously. So we'll see. It's not going to be like exorbitant, hundreds of dollars like a Kim Jong-il book. We don't want it to be that. So we want to keep it somewhat affordable still. But that's the plan right now. I do have another book coming out, not just an educational book, but we are doing an actual art book. And that one will be in accordion style. And that should be out this year at the end of the year also. So Lightbox Expo, New York Comic Con. We will be doing a workshop in Toronto this year in October as well. Those are the shows I'll be at. And so those will be the times in which you'll be able to get a copy from me directly and also have me sign or draw on it if you do come to those shows. So how many chapters will this book have? Well, 3 for sure of the subject matter. And each of these chapters, I'm going to expand on it a little bit more, if anything else. So it's really total of 3. But each chapter is quite broad, quite thick. I'm hoping to get this to at least, 150 pages or a little bit less than that. I'm not sure. The amount of pages I have here already, it's obviously on one side. So I think this is easily over 100 something pages right now. So, yeah, it's a lot of drawing. I got about maybe this, what is it here? About like that much done initially. And that was from, I worked on this book from last year. And I stopped working on it in June last year because after I got sick, I just wasn't able to work on it. And so it just pushed until I recovered. And then last month? Starting last month, I got back into it and I did all these pages. So you're looking at to do all of this was probably about 2 months of just sketching. But to make books is quite an endeavor. To make any sort of book that's serious, I would say it takes about a year of solid work. Solid. Yeah, Super Ronnie would be publishing it and selling it. Oh, so the book in the thumbnail, I forgot to share this, is this book here. So this is actually one of the books that inspired the Dynamic Bible. If people wonder, it's like, where did it come from? People always even wonder, it's like, does it have some sort of religious context? Because it's Bible. It's like, no, it's just a collection of sort of messages, right, based on the ideas of sketching. So this book, things like these sort of icons and stuff like that, the gold, sort of embossing and printing, was inspired by a lot of natural history books. So these sort of natural books from the 1800s. This one is a collection of volume 4. I'll go through it real quickly. This is an old book. This was printed in 1893. I found this as a collection of 4 books at a bookstore, and I just bought all of them. I can't remember how much I paid. It was a couple $100. Worth it. Very much worth it. But I have several of these sort of like natural books that are from like the 1800s and 1900s. And they're all like, wildlife collection. Even like the Audubon, stuff like that too. I have. But this goes into a lot of, this particular volume, this is volume 2, goes into fish. So I was using this as a frame of like inspiration. Most of it is like etching work. Some beautiful studies here. Etches, sturgeons. I'm amazed how the quality of this book is held up. Again, this is from it says 1893. The binding is still solid. Hasn't torn, hasn't ripped. Normally, right here, all of this would fall apart. You can start to see a little bit right there tearing. But typically, books like this, if you find them, are just like falling apart. Gulper eel. They got color plates inside too. This one's a bit of a rare one, this collection. But I love these sort of historical kind of books. The kind of books I buy these days is mostly like antique books. I don't really buy new books that much anymore. I have such a massive book collection, but I'm willing to invest and spend on old books. That's a beautiful etching. This is Arapaima. Salmon. Trouts. There's a section in here, they also did a really cool, it's a flying fish. Monkfish. There's a snake fish, living fish. Mackerels, swordfish. There's an archer fish back here. Archer. But they also, here it is, skeletal system. This is of a perch. I didn't do skeletons for the fish in mine because I did bones for wildlife. So some beautiful stuff in here. And then this goes from marine life to amphibians to then reptiles. And then it goes into birds. And so it's 4 volumes. Amazing collection. So that's why I love going to antique stores. I love going to like old bookstores, and I'll rummage through like old collections of stuff like this and find them if I can. It's a great book. Any UK stores that sell the Dynamic Bible, you would have to go online. Go to Liberdistry. They're based in Paris, and they will ship it to wherever in Europe. So UK would be easy. Yeah, this is volume 2. I have volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this was one of the books of inspiration for the Dynamic Bible that I have. You probably couldn't see in the video, but there's volume 2. This is one. I have another small little natural history book that's really nice. And so that, again, led to creating emblems like this and the trim and same sort of style. So that's kind of where the Dynamic Bible kind of came from initially, in terms of design look of it. All natural history books. Again, there's that little insect emblem right here. The insect. Inspiration. It's cool stuff. Anyways, thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate you all asking all the questions, comments. I hope you were able to receive something from this experience and hanging out and drawing with me. I'm going to try to come back on at some point into the future. Obviously, Comic Con San Diego is next week for me, so it's going to be kind of crazy and busy. I might try to stream from Comic Con San Diego, depending on the connection if I have. I might try to do a day where I can stream from the show. So look forward to that if I can do so. And then, of course, after the show is done, I'll try to come back into the table and continue working on more stuff, and I'll come back on again. So look forward to it. Follow me on social media on Instagram. You'll see a lot of the pop-up stories of like when I'll pop on. There's no exact schedule as to like when these sort of streams pop up. But the best thing to do, again, like I said, is to be able to just follow me on social media, and you'll be able to kind of see when they happen here and there. So share it, subscribe, comment, follow more, and leave any sort of like feedback if you can. Then I'll try to do the best to make adjustments. So thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all next time. And have fun. Go sketch more.